A married couple come talk to me today where the husband uses too much marijuana and he wanted to quit. He didn't know how to quit. And the wife was newly pregnant and due in 8 months ish. And he was like, I want to get out of this before the baby's born, but also I recognize how much it upsets my wife. But I've done this since I was a teenager. It's just gotten worse and I can't seem to get rid of it. Now, they were sent to me because one of his relatives is also one of my clients. Her and her husband are one of my clients, and they have been for months now. And his sister was like, you need to go talk to Trevor. So he paid for them to have a session to come talk to me, and I got to talk to him for a little over an hour today. And they started like most couples do, with very vague information, right? And so 15, 20 minutes into the call, I have next to no information. And so I'm just helping them from the very little information that they have. But when I addressed the marijuana issue, after listening to the wife talk and listening to the husband talk back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and I was like, it sounds to me like you're a chameleon, that you're the kind of person, you're the kind of man that gets your sense of value or self-worth or security from the emotional condition of the people around you, that you allow yourself to modify the way you present yourself to the people you're with as a way of ensuring that emotionally they're stable or satisfied, because that doesn't just determine your sense of safety or security, but it also determines your sense of self-worth or value. Like how positive their emotions are is a direct reflection to you of how well you're doing and therefore how valuable you are, but also a direct correlation to your security. And I was like, does that seem accurate? And he goes, yes. And I was like, okay, then I would argue that in this current relationship dynamic that you have with the people that you're telling me about and your current wife, that you have what I would consider conflicting personalities, like clashing, like conflicting priorities, right? Where, one person is feeling this, the other person's feeling that. They're both important to you, even if not equally, but you don't know how to navigate the two. When the truth is you're surrendering your own self, trying to serve both of them, and it's pulling you too far in too many different directions. And because you don't know where your value comes from, you also don't know where your security comes from, and you're running yourself rampant and exhausted trying to satisfy the emotions of everyone around you. And he goes, yeah, that sounds right. I'm like, right, which means that when you're not doing that, your security feels threatened. He's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, well, I would argue that the reason you chose marijuana is because somewhere in your mind, you believed that this was a healthier, a better alternative than what you would end up doing, being, or becoming without it. And he was like, yeah. I was like, okay. Well, then, something we need to accept really simply is that while marijuana was originally a choice, it has now become an addiction, which from a classification standpoint counts as a disorder. Like the addiction is in it of itself a disorder. It's a mental health disorder. It's no longer something that's freely chosen, rather something that you've gotten trapped in. Like that's a completely different matter to address. But what we can address is the bad beliefs or poor beliefs or negative beliefs that led you to believing you had to choose it in the first place. Because at the end of the day, you were just trying to make sure you were okay. And you chose marijuana, even if now you recognize it was a poor choice, but you chose it because at the time it was the best alternative solution to far worse outcomes. He was like, yeah. I'm like, okay, do you really think God would condemn you or shame you or punish you for you trying to do the best you could to be the best you could be without becoming worse? And he's like, well, no. I'm like, then why are you allowing yourself to be shamed? Like, why? One of the hardest parts about overcoming anything is separating yourself from the shame of having to admit it was wrong in the first place. I'm like, but God's not condemning you for it, even if he's correcting you for it. He's calling you to higher and better and more, but he's not simultaneously shaming you or condemning you for what you've already done. He recognizes that you did your best or were doing your best to try and help yourself from becoming worse. I'm like, let me ask you a question. How do you think God would handle that conversation if you were to have it with him? And he goes, probably with a lot of empathy. And I was like, yeah, 100% with a lot of empathy. I'm like, so I want to offer you this encouragement. I don't know if I'll see you again. I recognize this was paid for you. But if you guys decide to come back, I will do my best to make this affordable for you to help you prior to your wife giving birth. But there is a way out of this. And it comes down to modifying the beliefs that led you there in the first place. And we can identify those, we can attack those, and we can find the truth in Scripture. Now, why am I telling you this? That applies to everything in your life. So many of us don't even realize what problems we actually are encountering just because we don't have enough information. Your life or marriage or relationship or responsibilities don't have to be completely drowning before you reach out for help. There are very simple things that can be applied to your own life to improve the overall condition or quality of your life within your marriage specifically. Simple example is his sister today was we were doing a call, and she brought up just an argument that her and her husband had last weekend over a desk. They have two office desks from IKEA in the same room of their house. They both work remotely, and the desks were starting to bow and sag. And she brought it up to her partner. He sort of inadvertently addressed it, but didn't address it to the way that she wanted to. And that really frustrated her. And I asked how she handled that. She said, I went to my room and screamed to my pillow and, ABC and, whatever. So we worked through that, and I was able to teach her the different types of personalities that exist from an umbrella perspective in regards to their expectations for communication and what their communication needs are. And once I had taught it to her, she goes, oh my God, my husband is blank and I'm this. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, so the reason that conversation failed was because you presented information in the way that you would need it based on your personality type. He didn't receive it correctly because it wasn't presented to him the way that his personality would need it to be received. But if you modify the language to be presented in this capacity, it's going to be received a whole lot better. And she goes, let me ask a question. I've thought about doing, XYZ in terms of okay, I'll just help you. She wanted to create a standard operating procedure for routine cleaning tasks. She goes, I think that my husband has really strong ADHD. And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, give me an example of a cleaning task that she would have in mind. She's like, I don't know, cleaning the living room. I'm like, great. On the list of things, flip on the living room light switch. Like, that's step one. Turn on the lights in the living room. Flip the light switch. I'm like, what you want to do, if you're going to create a standard operating procedure for people with ADHD that are willing to receive the checklist of things to do, don't be demeaning, present it and see if they're willing to accept it. I'm like, but start with the most emotionally easy things to do. Flip on the light switch, plug in the vacuum, turn the vacuum on, tilt the vacuum. I'm like, all of those really small, really simple things to a person with ADHD, like a low threshold for dopamine, just those 4 things in order are already going to make them feel like they conquered the world because they checked something off the list. I'm like, even better, at the bottom of the list, put a reward. I'm like, we know that something he values is time alone playing a video game. I'm like, so that's something that's really important to him. That's something you're willing to allow him to do in terms of you don't have a problem with it, but both of you have the same concern, which is you want household responsibilities to be taken care of before video games happen. He's questioning how to motivate himself to do better with household responsibilities. You're questioning how to get him to do them to a better standard. And he wants to prioritize video games and you want to allow him, but you also want to feel secure that your house is taken care of. I'm like, so make a checklist of itemized things to do on a daily basis, just 1 or 2 things every day, and maybe put 30 or 45 minutes of earned video game time at the bottom. And what I mean by that is that's 45 minutes that he gets to have that you don't get to complain about, right? I'm like, if he does his chores every day of the week, at the end of the week, he has 3.5 hours of video game time, and he can stack those up. Do it 2 weeks in a row, he's got 7 hours. On a Saturday, he can sit down for 7 hours, and for an entire 7 hours, you're not allowed to complain. You're not allowed to make alternative plans. This is his personal private time. ABC. I'm like, but both of you are going to feel satisfied with that. And he loved the idea. He was like, oh my God, I would love that, right? And so this is something that worked for them specifically. But the amount of things that you can do to improve your overall quality of life and communication by better understanding the not just umbrella categories of types of personalities and communications, but better understanding the needs of communications from the other person and the intentions of communication of the other person will change dramatically. I met with this woman's brother today. I've been meeting with his sister and her husband for a couple of months now, and both him and his wife were like, oh my God, she and her husband are completely different people. And they credit you for the change. She's like, how much different they are today compared to a few months ago. Even their marriage is way different. They're so much more peaceful. They're so much more kinder. They're so much more kind. They have so much better energy. They communicate. The change is dramatic. And I was like, I can't take the credit for that. I was capable of teaching them, but they did the work. All I did was point them in the right direction. But it was simple things. Their marriage wasn't even on the rocks. They were just having competing conversations with conflicting versions of communication. And all we did was clean up how they understand each other. That's as simple as ABC 1, 2, 3. Why not do that? How much more peaceful would your everyday life be? Anyway, I'm really making that for you who's been thinking about, do I need this? Yeah, probably. Why not? Come talk to me. We'll see how it goes. But I love you. Hope that helps.